Thank you very much for coming back from the break. And we're moving forward with session 3 on olive oil, health and nutrition. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce Professor Miguel Delgado Rodriguez, who is a professor of medicine and public health at the University of Jaén, and he is going to talk to us on Mediterranean diet with energy restriction, physical activity, and nutritional support. He will talk to us about the PREDIMED Plus trial. Professor?
No funciona el puntero. En primer lugar, agradecer al comité organizador de este congreso la amabilidad que han tenido y la distinción de poder hablar ante todos ustedes. Como bien ha dicho el moderador, les voy a comentar el... No funciona.
Sí, funciona. Déjelo pulsado y se enciende la luz. Y para pasar, el del centro.
Para pasar el del centro. Y si pongo pulsado, se enciende la luz. Perfecto, gracias. Bien, como le he dicho, vamos a comentarles los resultados de un estudio que nos ha llevado durante los últimos 9 años de nuestra labor investigadora. Los fundamentos de este ensayo pues son conocidos por todos ustedes. Aquí simplemente tienen una gráfica de datos mundiales en la que se refleja la frecuencia de obesidad en las mujeres en el año 1975. La mayor parte de los países, evidentemente, se encuentran por debajo del 5%. 41 años después, la cifra cambia de forma radical. Aquí vemos que los colores, evidentemente, ya vemos ya zonas donde la frecuencia de obesidad supera claramente el 25%. Otro de los hechos que fundamentan evidentemente la realización del estudio PREDIMED Plus es los efectos de la obesidad y del sobrepeso. Como saben ustedes, se debe fundamentalmente, mayoritariamente a la enfermedad cardiovascular, pero también se relaciona la obesidad y el sobrepeso con los cánceres, con la diabetes y, por supuesto, con la enfermedad renal crónica. El ensayo DIRECT, que se publicó en el New England hace ya 12 años, comparó 3 tipos de dieta. Una dieta baja en grasa, una dieta mediterránea y una dieta baja en carbohidratos. Y lo que se vio a lo largo de los 2 años de intervención es que el peso descendía tanto con la dieta mediterránea como con la dieta baja en carbohidratos, sin diferencia significativa entre ellas. Pero el descenso de peso era mucho menor con la dieta baja en grasa. Después de la intervención se hizo un seguimiento posterior durante varios años y también lo que llamó la atención es que la recuperación del peso, ya sin intervención, fue menor en la dieta mediterránea que con los otros 2 tipos de dieta, lo cual abogaban hacia el uso de este tipo de dieta. En el estudio PREDIMED, que ha sido muy mencionado a lo largo de estos días, se comprobó que la adherencia al patrón de dieta mediterránea, cuanto mayor era, mayor fue el descenso de peso. Esto, como es tan natural, también abogaba por el uso de esta dieta para conseguir reducir las consecuencias de la obesidad y el sobrepeso. También se publicaron los resultados del DPP, del Diabetes Prevention Program, que era un ensayo sobre más de 3.000 sujetos de una edad media de 51 años, en la que tenían una glicemia elevada, una glucemia en ayuno elevada y un índice de masa corporal también que fuera al menos de sobrepeso o de obesidad. En este ensayo, con un seguimiento inicial a 2,8 años, se compararon 3 grupos, el grupo placebo, el grupo de metformina, frente a una intervención del estilo de vida. Lo que se observó al cabo de los años de seguimiento fue que el grupo de metformina disminuía evidentemente la incidencia de diabetes, no más que el grupo placebo, pero el descenso fue todavía mayor con el grupo de intervención sobre el estilo de vida. Esto, evidentemente, junto a otro tipo de estudios, hicieron plantearse al profesor Martínez González, que es el alma mater del diseño de esta investigación y que ayer nos dio una estupenda charla, pues le hizo plantearse el diseño del estudio Predimed Plus. El Predimed Plus es hijo del Predimed. El Predimed fue un estudio que ayer nos comentaron, que duró aproximadamente unos 6-7 años, y el estudio Predimed es su hijo natural, ¿no? En donde, evidentemente, lo que nosotros intentábamos era, aparte de la dieta mediterránea, sumar la restricción calórica y una intervención conductual en la que se fomentara sobre todo la actividad física. El descenso a largo plazo fue comprobar que el mayor el efecto principal, que eran los Major Adverse Cardiovascular Events, pues se redujeron. Inicialmente el estudio se programó para 6.000 personas. Los criterios de elegibilidad fueran para varones entre 55 y 75 años de edad, mujeres entre 60 y 75, con claro sobrepeso u obesidad y que cumplieran al menos 3 criterios de síndrome metabólico. Y la proporción de diabéticos que no superara el 25%. El tamaño muestral, con esas asunciones, se estimó en alrededor de 6.000 personas y que se repartieron al azar en un grupo de cuidados habituales y con los resultados que se obtuvieron del Predimed teníamos que recomendar obligadamente la dieta mediterránea. Y en el otro grupo de intervención intensiva para la pérdida de peso, como es natural, ya se incorporó la restricción calórica, la intervención conductual, en la que sobre todo se hacía hincapié en la actividad física. Los centros reclutadores de este estudio, del Predimed Plus, fueron los 11 iniciales no del estudio Predimed, a los que se sumó, evidentemente, 12 nuevos centros y entre los que se incorporó, como es natural, gracias a la invitación del profesor Martínez González, pues nos incorporamos nosotros desde Jaén. El tiempo de reclutamiento, de reparto aleatorio a lo largo de la fase inicial de este estudio, que se empieza en el año 2013, se alcanzó aproximadamente para octubre del año 2016, pues se alcanzó ya el total de reclutamiento, los 6.000 personas. Pero como se habían comprometido nuevos centros, se decidió prolongar un poco más el tiempo de aleatorización y al final concluyó en el año 2017, al final, hasta el 31 de diciembre de 2016, con aproximadamente 6.874 personas. Aquí tenemos el tamaño de muestra de los centros reclutadores y en el que el más importante pues, fue el del profesor Martínez González de la Universidad de Navarra. El seguimiento medio hasta hace un mes era de 8 años aproximadamente, seguimiento mediano muy parecido y el rango intercuartílico entre 7 y 9 años. La duración de la intervención y la duración del seguimiento inicialmente se planificó para 6 años, pero la realidad es que estamos ya en el año octavo de su planteamiento. El tiempo medio de seguimiento se planteó inicialmente para 8 años, pero en la realidad vamos a llegar a los 10 años para la mayoría de los grupos. Y el ensayo acabará el 31 de diciembre de este año. Los resultados principales, los efectos principales, pues son los efectos cardiovasculares, que fueron los mismos que en el caso del estudio Predimed. Vamos a ver. En donde el efecto principal fue un evento combinado un evento combinado, MACE, que era la suma del infarto agudo de miocardio, el ictus y la muerte cardiovascular. Había otros efectos secundarios como angina inestable, insuficiencia cardíaca, tromboembolismo, diabetes tipo 2, enfermedades neurodegenerativas, depresión, diferentes tipos de cáncer, piedras en la vesícula, gota, fractura osteoporótica y cirugía de catarata. Y también teníamos efectos intermedios, entre los cuales, como natural, era el grado de cumplimiento de la dieta mediterránea, ¿no? Y ver si la restricción calórica alcanzaba su peso, la presión sistólica, concentraciones de lípidos, función renal, medicación, proteína C reactiva, hemoglobina, etc. La intervención, teníamos dos grupos. Para el grupo de intensivo, en el que lógicamente queríamos conseguir una mayor pérdida de peso, pues teníamos una fase, un periodo de running, en el cual queríamos comprobar el grado de funcionamiento, porque era un seguimiento a largo plazo, y queríamos comprobar la voluntad del posible participante para comprometerse con los objetivos del estudio. Entonces, en ese periodo de running se le hacían una serie de preguntas, se le hacía evidentemente una serie de visitas y se le llamaba por teléfono y tenía que cumplimentar una serie de cuestionarios. Una vez que comprobábamos que el paciente se comprometía con los objetivos de la investigación, se efectuaba la aleatorización mediante un programa informático y durante los meses del primer año había cada mes una intervención grupal y una intervención individual aparte de una llamada de teléfono. En los años siguientes, la intervención mensual era de tipo grupal y la intervención de tipo individual pasaba a ser cada 3 meses junto con una llamada de teléfono. En este grupo de intervención intensiva, como natural, se les proponía un patrón de dieta mediterránea restringido en calorías, en donde la reducción era, o sea, teníamos que conseguir que perdiera por lo menos 600 kilocalorías al día, reemplazar las comidas principales por alimentos que tuvieran bajo contenido calórico, se fomentaba la frugalidad, que no se consumieran alimentos procesados, que evidentemente se cumpliera la dieta mediterránea y lo más posible alejado de la dieta occidental. Queríamos también conseguir un incremento gradual en la actividad física, el equivalente a un paseo vivo durante 40 minutos al día, o algo equivalente. Había una monitorización por parte del propio paciente, 2 veces a la semana para el peso, 2 veces a la semana también para el perímetro de cintura. A una submuestra se le dio pedómetro y acelerómetro y se le aplicaba, para ver el grado de cumplimiento de la dieta mediterránea, el patrón del propio estudio Predimed con 17 preguntas. Y también había una intervención conductual para controlar los estímulos hacia la comida, para evidentemente facilitarle la elección de alimentos y cómo cocinarlo, y evidentemente también tratamiento de las recaídas en el caso de que el peso no descendiera. En el grupo de baja intensidad, que actuaba como grupo control, se le recomendaba la dieta mediterránea tradicional, en lo que se le distribuía el mismo protocolo escrito que se había utilizado para el estudio Predimed. No había restricción calórica, por lo tanto, fue ad libitum la cantidad de alimentos que ellos podían consumir. No se hizo ninguna recomendación específica sobre dieta, sobre actividad física. No había automonitorización ni de perímetro de cintura ni de peso y no se les proponían objetivos de pérdida de peso. En cuanto a esa intervención, cómo se realizaba, eran mediante 2 intervenciones grupales, cada 6 meses aproximadamente, y como incentivo se les proporcionó 2 litros de aceite de oliva virgen extra al mes, que también se le daban al grupo, evidentemente, de intensiva. Y también se le aplicó el screener de dieta mediterránea del estudio Predimed. La intervención sobre actividad física incluía ejercicios de fuerza, incluía ejercicios de flexibilidad, se recomendaba evidentemente, bueno, pues ejercicios sencillos como en la silla, ejercicios de paseo, y se les proponía que tuvieran un plan semanal de actividad física donde anotaran lo que ellos iban realizando. En cuanto a las exposiciones, pues bueno, esta es una gráfica un poco compleja. Teníamos al principio el cuestionario de elegibilidad, en donde tenían que responder una serie de preguntas, como les he dicho antes, para ver el grado de compromiso que podía adquirir el paciente con el estudio, porque era un seguimiento a largo plazo, y, como natural, tenían que completar un registro de 3 días de alimento. Ya a los reclutados, evidentemente, pues se les hacían mediciones antropométricas, se les hacía un cuestionario general de estilo de vida y de todo, se les aplicaba un cuestionario de frecuencia de alimentos validado en la población española de 143 preguntas, se les aplicaba el cuestionario de adherencia a la dieta mediterránea, había un cuestionario de actividad física, el test de la silla, acelerómetro en una submuestra, cuestionarios de seguimiento cada año, electrocardiograma, presión sanguínea, recolección de muestras de sangre, recolección de muestras de orina, uñas, test neuropsicológicos, que comentaremos más adelante, cuestionarios psicopatológicos y también cuestionarios de estilo de vida en el que se aplicó el SF36, la Short Form 36. Bien, se valoró también como natural la adherencia a dieta mediterránea. Como esto ha sido muy reiterado estos días, pues lo pasaré porque ya es muy conocido de todos ustedes. En la valoración de actividad física se aplicó el RAPA, ¿no? Actividad física de valoración rápida, ¿no? Que se había utilizado previamente en el estudio de las enfermeras norteamericanas y que ha sido validado en el español. Se aplicó también el cuestionario de actividad física breve Minnesota, que ha sido validado también para el estudio Regicor en Girona. Además, como natural, se utilizó el test de la silla, sentarse y levantarse durante 30 segundos. A una submuestra se le repartieron acelerómetros tipo Gene Active y también se valoró la asistencia a las visitas individuales o grupales en cada uno de los grupos. En cuanto a los resultados, como natural, pues voy a ser breve porque no estamos autorizados ni tenemos datos sobre los principales efectos, no lo ha permitido el Comité Científico Asesor Externo del estudio. Entonces, aquí lo que tenemos es el reparto de las variables fundamentales, predictoras, sobre todo de enfermedad cardiovascular, y no cambió el peso, no hubo diferencia entre el grupo control y el grupo de intervención, ni basó el peso, ni el sexo, ni el tabaco, ni el perfil lipídico, ni la presión sanguínea, ni la hipertensión, ni tampoco había variaciones entre los grupos en cuanto al grado de adherencia a la dieta mediterránea. Pero sí hubo una diferencia significativa. Y la diferencia fue que los asignados al grupo control hacían más actividad física, consumían más PETs por minuto a la semana que los del grupo de intervención. Y esto jugaba en nuestra contra. Y la diferencia fue claramente significativa. En esta variable no funcionó. Bien, tenemos resultados provisionales, ¿no? Los resultados provisionales a 6 y 10 meses se publicaron hace unos años en Diabetes Care y que vamos a comentarlo a continuación. Entonces, en este se consideró que era una especie de estudio piloto y que era para ver si la intervención se estaba realizando bien y se podían proponer cambios en caso de que los resultados no fueran en la línea que queríamos a lo largo del estudio. Entonces, este estudio piloto pues, se hizo sobre aproximadamente 626 pacientes que fueron los que entraron en el análisis por intención de tratar, que cumplían evidentemente todas las condiciones. Aquí lo que tenemos a los 6 meses es el cambio en el peso corporal y lo que apreciamos es que en el grupo de intervención fue claramente mayor que en el grupo control. Esto evidentemente pues, nos ayudaba. También que al menos el 5% estuvieran por debajo del peso basal, también fue mayor en el grupo de intervención que en el grupo control. En otras variables, pues en el cambio del índice de masa corporal, pues también a los 12 meses observamos que era mucho mayor el descenso en el grupo de intervención que en el grupo control. Y lo mismo sucedió con el cambio en la circunferencia de la cintura, en el perímetro de cintura, que fue claramente mayor en el grupo de intervención, el descenso, que en el grupo control. Resultados provisionales también se han publicado parcialmente en JAMA, que complementan algunos de los que hemos mencionado a continuación. En este estudio en JAMA, lo primero que valoramos era cómo, ya hemos dicho, al principio no había diferencia entre el grupo de intervención y el grupo control en el screener de dieta mediterránea del Predimed. A los 6 meses, sin embargo, ya observamos que había un grado de adherencia superior en 2 puntos en el grupo de intervención que en el grupo control, que a los 12 meses se seguía manteniendo. Y las diferencias fueron claramente significativas. En cuanto, una prolongación, estos datos no están publicados, a lo largo ya no de 1 año, sino de 3 años, en el cambio del screener del estudio Predimed de los 17 puntos, pues lo que observamos es que era mayor en el grupo de intervención que en el grupo control. Por lo tanto, esto era subjetivo de que estábamos haciendo las cosas bien. Ya hemos dicho que hubo diferencia en cuanto al peso, en cuanto al perímetro de cintura y en cuanto al índice de masa corporal. Ya se reflejó. Pero en el cambio neto en otros factores de riesgo, claro, para la enfermedad cardiovascular, como es el HDL o el LDL colesterol, triglicéridos o presión sistólica, tanto la diastólica como la sistólica, pues no hubo diferencia entre los dos grupos. Sobre la actividad física, los resultados fueron publicados 1 año antes y lo que observamos como indicador de que estábamos, haciendo las cosas bien desde el punto de vista de la intervención, es que en el grupo de intervención la actividad física aumentó hasta un 60%, que apenas hubo modificaciones al cabo del año en el grupo control. Otros resultados provisionales han sido los que hemos encontrado con respecto a la cognición. Aquí solo tenemos un subgrupo pequeño de 487. Y lo que hemos observado es que la adherencia al screener de 17 ítems del Predimed, pues se relaciona con mejoras en la memoria y que las mejoras en la memoria también se correlacionan con reducciones en el índice de masa corporal tras 1 año y con mejoras en la actividad física después de 3 años. También relacionado con los problemas de cognición, realizamos los Trail Making Tests que ustedes conocen, que son conectar números en el 1 o en el A y luego conectar números con letras de forma progresiva en el B, pues que, la adherencia a la dieta mediterránea se relacionó con mejoras en el mini-mental state, con una tendencia claramente significativa, y que también mejoraron el Trail Making Test, tanto el A como el B, de forma significativa en el grupo de intervención frente al grupo control. Si nosotros relacionamos los diferentes ítems que componen el patrón de dieta mediterránea, la función cognitiva global, pues fundamentalmente se relaciona de manera significativa con el consumo primario de aceite de oliva, que es lo que hemos resaltado. Y no hubo diferencia significativa con los demás apartados que componen el screener de dieta mediterránea del estudio Predimed. Así que, a modo de conclusión, yo no les puedo facilitar más información, pues lo que tenemos, evidentemente, es que tenemos reducción en peso y mejores mediciones antropométricas, tenemos poca influencia sobre los factores de riesgo cardiovascular y tenemos un incremento en la actividad física que se relaciona con una mejora en la función cognitiva. Pero tenemos que esperar un año para ver si la intervención modifica los riesgos de todas las enfermedades, porque el estudio, como les digo, acabará la intervención el 31 de diciembre de este año y los eventos se recogerán a lo largo del primer trimestre del año 2025. Y es todo cuanto tengo que decirles. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Thank you very much. We'll be very anxious to hear the results of next year. Until we change this, I would like to introduce Jane Woodside, the Director of Professor of Human Nutrition within the Centre of Public Health at the Queen's University in Belfast, UK. And she will present us on increasing olive oil intake and adherence to the Mediterranean diet in non-Mediterranean populations, which is a very hot area right now. We're trying to call it planetarian diet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the organisers for the very kind invitation to present to you today. So as our chair has said, I'm going to be talking about attempts to increase olive oil intake and increase adherence to a Mediterranean diet, but importantly in non-Mediterranean populations who perhaps are not so enthusiastic about changing to a Mediterranean diet, and some of the work that we've been doing over the last 15 years or so to try and encourage that adherence. It's very difficult to go after the presentation of PREDIMED Plus with sample sizes of 6,000. I will be talking about a series of much smaller studies, so bear with me. So let me just see if I can move this on. Okay, so we know that poor diet is responsible for premature deaths, estimated to be about 1 in 7 of premature deaths. And we do have issues with diet quality in the UK. So the National Diet and Nutrition Survey suggests that we have low fibre intake, less than 10% achieving recommended fibre intakes. We have high saturated fat intake. Our sugar intake is 2 to 3 times what is recommended. We have low fruit and veg intake, and we are well below recommended oily fish intake. Against that background, there are significant diet inequalities. So those with lower education, with lower income, are certainly most at risk of poorer diet, and then also poorer health. Cost comes in. The most deprived fifth of the population, it has been estimated in the UK, would need to spend 50% of their income on food to meet UK dietary guidelines. And that's compared to just 11% in those who are least deprived. So cost is a big concern when we do try and encourage people to make improvements in their diet quality. So turning to a Mediterranean diet, we became interested in this a number of years ago. And obviously the Mediterranean diet is the diet common to the Mediterranean region, and I know there's lots of complexity there. But there is information looking at adhering to Mediterranean diet and all-cause mortality in different global regions, and so confirmed that in Northern, Central and Eastern Europe, Mediterranean Europe and Western Europe, that the relative risks for mortality tend to be much the same. So a health benefit has been proposed no matter what region of Europe and indeed the globe exists. And there's been some debate around how you evaluate and adopt Mediterranean diet for non-Mediterranean populations, and various attempts to consider some of the factors that we need to think about, including the sort of levels of intervention that we might have to think about, be it contact with a healthcare professional, written resources, provision of foods, recipes, regular contact with a health professional, those sorts of things. We've also had some discussion around how you transfer Mediterranean diet to non-Mediterranean countries, what is and what isn't a Mediterranean diet. So bearing all that in mind, let's turn to what a Northern Irish diet looks like just before we talk about trying to change it. So here are some of the key foods consumed as part of a Northern Irish diet. So it's one of the key Key contributors is a cooked breakfast where you can consume fried bread, fried eggs, sausages, bacon, few mushrooms and tomatoes, not always consumed. This dish is fried mince, beef mince, with some carrots and onions and served with mashed potato. There's a lot of interest in takeaway foods, so food eaten out of home from fast food establishments. So this is fish, battered fish and chips. And there's a lot of consumption of snack foods, and that leads to the National Diet and Nutrition Survey that I talked about in terms of nutrient composition. On the plus side, Northern Ireland has a strong agri-food sector, so there's great pride in food that is produced locally. There's a major production around meat, beef and dairy. So there's some pride in local food, and maybe that is something that could be used to motivate the population to make changes to their diet. So starting quite a number of years ago in response to the Leon Diet Heart Study, we tried to get some funding to say, could we get people to adhere to a Mediterranean diet and measure impact and clinical outcomes in Northern Ireland, in the UK? And the funders said, no, you'll never get Northern Irish people to eat a Mediterranean diet. So we decided to try and prove them wrong, and we started off repeating the Leon Diet Heart Study, taking people who had just had MI or who had unstable angina, and giving them a range of different dietary advice methods over a 12-month period, and looked at change in Mediterranean diet score. And Mediterranean diet score increased by between 2.5 to 3 points on originally a 9-point scale at both 6 and 12 months in all intervention groups. So regardless what dietary advice we gave them or in the intensity of it, we got them to change their behaviour, and we confirmed that with objective biomarkers of compliance. Inspired then by Predimed a number of years later, we developed an intervention that used peer support to try and encourage adoption of the Mediterranean diet at those at high risk of CVD. And that was because we knew that the dietary intervention in Predimed was expensive, it was intensive, and it would be difficult for us to roll that out at large scale. So we used the MRC framework to guide the development and evaluation of complex interventions to develop that peer support intervention. We had a logic model and we had a theoretical basis for trying to achieve that behaviour change. And as part of that development process, we did some qualitative work with the target group, and we asked them about barriers to dietary change. And I've just picked out some of the quotes that refer to olive oil, given that that is the focus of this meeting. So who's going to buy olive oil if you can buy lard, for example, because it's significantly cheaper? I don't mind cooking in olive and rapeseed oil, but don't ask me to pour it over pasta, I wouldn't eat it. And they put a lot of olive oil on their food, and that's all calories. So this is a population that's been told for a long time that fats and oils are a bad food group, and that you avoid those because they're high in fat and high in calories. So those are the sorts of challenges that we're trying to overcome. Most people were aware of a Mediterranean diet when we mentioned the term, but they had limited knowledge of its composition. So our conclusion from that qualitative work that there were concerns in our population about the acceptability and perceived healthiness of certain foods, the cost and availability of relative foods, the knowledge, time or cooking skills that might be required, the sustainability of that dietary pattern for the Northern Irish climate, its culture and dietary traditions, and just again the challenge of changing established eating patterns. I took these photographs on Monday just to show you what an oil shelf looks like in Northern Ireland. And this is from a high-end supermarket. But you can see that sunflower oil, vegetable oil, which is rapeseed oil, and then toasted sesame oil, and then a range of olive oils. Olive oil, I imagine, as across Europe and globally, has increased significantly in price in the last number of months. So that is clearly a barrier. And this is a slightly lower end supermarket, where again we have much more dominant vegetable oils, which include sunflower and rapeseed oils, and a limited availability of olive oil. This is a locally produced rapeseed oil that is quite popular, and then again some sunflower oils on the left. So again, it's just a different, I suppose, environment in terms of the availability and indeed the cost of those different types of oil. The other thing that we do is that we use solid spread. We don't tend to drizzle olive oil, and that was referred to in the qualitative work. So again, we have spreads now that are enhanced with rapeseed oil and also with olive oil. But we also still have much cheaper lard and beef fat, which is still available. Not so widely used now, things are changing, but available and cheaper. So again, cost is a big issue. So coming back to this peer support intervention, so we designed educational material, which included shopping lists, recipe books, and some general dietary advice. We developed a peer support program, which was about 10 sessions over a 1-year period, led by 2 peer supporters, one of whom had to have had experience of dietary change and one of whom had to have experience of facilitating group sessions. And we did recommend either olive or rapeseed oil. Based on that background of availability and cost, we recommended both olive and rapeseed oil. Given the fact that there is similar fatty acid composition, absolutely understand that there is difference in polyphenol composition, but there is reduced cost. It's locally produced, and we also recommended olive or rapeseed spread. We assessed compliance using an adapted version of the 14-item original Predimed score, but we did make some changes, and the changes are highlighted here. So anything in solid green is identical to the original Predimed score. If it's in patterned green, it just means that we changed the portion number slightly to get a point, and then we made some changes to the elements in red. So we added in a point for olive or rapeseed oil based spread. We dropped sofrito, I have to say, because there was just no way that we were going to get our population to make those changes. So again, we made some changes and we have some validity data on that score. So we ended up testing that peer support intervention against the proven Predimed intervention, so sessions with the dietitian and providing olive oil and nuts, and then minimal written dietary advice. It was actually still quite a lot of dietary advice because it included all those recipe books and shopping lists, etc., in the Team Med trial. Participants were at high risk of CVD, so their CVD risk was estimated to be over 20% in the next 10 years, based on British guidelines. And we recruited people with low Mediterranean diet adherence. So on that 14-point scale, our mean Mediterranean diet adherence was 2.1, so very low on the scale. And no matter what way we gave the dietary advice, was it minimal, was it peer support, or was it intensive, we achieved, this is at 6 months, which was our primary outcome, but it was maintained at 12 months, a 5-point increase in Mediterranean diet score. So going from about 2 to about 7 or 8 on the score. For all participants, again, regardless of intervention group, we got the increases in MDS, but we also got improvements in BMI, in HbA1c, and in systolic and diastolic blood pressure. So we showed that a non-Mediterranean adult population at high CVD risk could make dietary behaviour change. It was a feasibility study, so we showed that the peer support intervention was feasible, and we hope that that will inform a definitive trial. Coming back to the olive oil and rapeseed oil question, and just to show you some of the data around what people got a point for. So these are the intervention groups, very few differences between the intervention groups, but the question around is olive oil or rapeseed oil your main cooking fat? That was at around 60% at baseline and went up to between 90 and 100% at 6 and 12 months. Around using olive oil and rapeseed oil based spreads, it was sitting at around 10% at baseline, had gone up to 70 to 80% at 6 and 12 months. And then our volume, so we were asking people to consume 4 tablespoons of oil a day and or 3 teaspoons of the spread, and that had gone from less than 10% to around 30%. So still some room for improvement, but some significant shifts in reported oil and spread use. We then did some further work looking at peer support in already existing groups. So we were randomising on an individual level, putting people together in peer support groups who didn't know each other. And we felt that going to established community groups where people were already in a group and knowing each other and maybe having that better interaction might work better in terms of changing behaviours. That's also published, we called it the Team Med Extend study. And actually we decided in the end, we concluded it wasn't feasible. There was another feasibility study, but it was actually very difficult to recruit for. But we only looked at the peer support versus the minimal intervention in that study. But you can see that from a baseline of around 3 of the Mediterranean diet score, we were getting increases of about 3 at 6 months, and then it was a further increase of about 1 in the peer support group at 12 months. So a sort of 3 to 4 point increase in Mediterranean diet score. Similar changes in terms of cooking fat, so going from 50% up to 86% over the course of the study. Use of spreads going from 10% to 70%, and the volume and quantity of olive and rapeseed oil going from 0 up to about 30%. So again, getting some significant shifts in dietary behaviour. The final study I'm going to talk to you about is not yet published. We've literally just finished it. But this is called the ProMed-X study. And it's slightly different in that it's looking at protein-enriched Mediterranean diet with or without an exercise component, and looking at a very different target population group. So looking at nutritional status, but also cognition in adults who are at risk of undernutrition and cognitive decline. So the protocol is published, and we've just had the final results approved by our study statistician. It's part of a broader EU-funded project working with colleagues in the Netherlands and Italy, where they're doing some similar analyses looking at existing cohort data, but we are doing the dietary intervention component. So this ProMed-X study, we were recruiting those over the age of 60 years. They had to have subjective memory decline and to be at high nutritional risk. So the Mini Nutritional Assessment Score is a validated tool to assess risk of undernutrition. And they were randomised then to receive either protein-enriched Mediterranean diet and exercise intervention, protein-enriched Mediterranean diet intervention only, or a control group. Now the control group was much lighter touch than our previous studies, in that they just got a healthy eating diet sheet, so they didn't get that lots of Mediterranean diet information. They simply got a single diet sheet, and it was a study over 6 months. The primary outcome was that Mini Nutrition Assessment, or MNA score. Also looking at cognitive performance, we have a ProMed diet score, which is again a slightly adapted Mediterranean diet score with the protein element brought in, and then a range of other body composition, muscle strength, physical performance endpoints. We've collected samples, not yet looked at them, to look at metabolomics, inflammatory, nutrient biomarkers, some metabolic signals, and then also stool samples to look at gut microbiome, to look at some mechanistic aspects of anything that we observe. So we actually had to screen nearly 800 participants to then end up with 105 entering the study. Attrition was around 15%. And mean age was around 68, 69% female, about 70% retired, 31% living alone. Number of years of education, around 15. MNA score suggesting risk of undernutrition, and BMI sitting at 23.8. So the primary outcome was that MNA score, and we showed that MNA score improved by more than 2 points, nearly 3 points in both intervention groups, so ProMed or ProMed-X, relative to control group. In terms of global cognition, this CACH-COG is the cognitive function score, and then the bottom score, the NTB, is the neuropsychological test battery. And again, significant improvement in global cognitive function in both intervention groups relative to control over the 6-month period of the intervention. No effect on grip strength, but physical performance, which was the short physical performance battery. Significant improvements in physical performance in both intervention groups. So the exercise has no additive improvement in physical performance compared to the exercise plus diet. No significant difference in the Mediterranean or ProMed group, no difference or impact on weight, but in the ProMed-X, so the diet plus exercise group, a significant increase in weight over the course of the study. And then finally, in ProMed diet score, we were seeing that diet score improve by about 4 points in both intervention groups relative to the control group after 6 months. So again, coming back to that olive or rapeseed oil as main cooking fat question, at baseline, slightly higher than what we'd seen in the previous studies, but remember we were recruiting for this study in the last 2 to 3 years, probably 5 to 6 years after the previous Team Med study. So I think that sort of represents some cultural change that has gone on in terms of purchasing and availability of oils in that time. So around 80% were consuming olive or rapeseed oil at baseline, and that went up to almost 100% in the 2 intervention groups, not obviously in the control group, at 3 and 6 months. And then in terms of the volume, olive or rapeseed oil gone from about 30% up to about 80% at 3 and 6 months. So just to sort of delve into that sort of four different Mediterranean diet focused interventions in a Northern European population. This comes from Team Med. We did quite a detailed process evaluation. There was a high level of acceptability of the Mediterranean diet. On a scale of -2 to +2, it was rated as 1.15 in terms of acceptability. The Mediterranean diet components did differ in terms of acceptability. Most acceptable were fruit and veg, whole grains, and interestingly olive oil, which we might not have expected. Least acceptable were reducing sweet foods, moderating alcohol, and consuming legumes. So something for us to work on then as we revise and develop those interventions in future. There were some negative comments from participants focused on the term diet and its connotations. So for various reasons, us referring to this as a Mediterranean dietary pattern or lifestyle choice may be beneficial. So again, there's this culture of diet being weight loss, focus on calorie restriction or just on restriction. So there was a preference for a change to the term. The impact of advice of rapeseed or olive oil intake, I think, needs to be evaluated because I think we've shifted in terms of availability and in terms of attitudes towards those. Cost does remain an issue in terms of olive oil recommendation, though. And just to note that the increasing Mediterranean diet score in these populations will also have moved our participants towards meeting the UK dietary guidelines, which is the Eat Well guide. I think it's fascinating trying to think about how we adapt the Mediterranean diet pattern without changing its unique health-promoting composition. So wrote a review to that end. It was published just in 2022. Thinking about what the detail is around how we culturally adapt the Mediterranean diet pattern, and would that make it more sustainable in these populations that are not, native to the Mediterranean region. So in summary, the effects of the Mediterranean diet and health outcomes in non-Mediterranean regions are definitely less studied, and there's limited evidence in terms of how we achieve dietary change successfully and sustainably. That is no doubt difficult, and I think it's slow, but I think it's important that we conduct this formative research to maximise acceptability and effectiveness in the long run. To do that, I think we do have to culturally adapt the dietary pattern, but we need to ensure that we preserve the core health-promoting elements and the nutritional composition. We also need to think about population-specific barriers, so key food availability, costs, the environmental impact of those, and the food systems transition that might be required at a local level. And finally, I think we still ought to think about inequalities, keep coming back to cost. We need to think about perhaps less individual level behaviour change, but also think about altering our environments where the healthy choice becomes the easy choice. So I'd just like to acknowledge everybody who's worked on these projects, particularly Dr. Claire McAvoy, who has led the final ProMed-X study, started off working as a researcher in Team Med and is now leading the next study. I'd like to thank you for your time and attention.
Questions and discussions. Much for your outstanding presentations. Questions?
Thank you very much for your presentations. They were very, very interesting and inspiring. So I have a question for Dr. Woodside. So one of the challenges that we have found in the Predimed Plus trial, and I guess that Professor Delgado will also agree with me, was having people to exercise more, to get more engaged in doing physical activity. That was quite a challenge in Predimed Plus. It's true that the profile of participants was different than in the PROMET trial. But so that's why I was quite surprised that people who had been allocated to PROMET, not PROMET X, but just PROMET, that they actually spontaneously increased their adherence to physical activity. They did more physical activity as long as I properly understood your data. Do you happen to have any explanation for that?
I have to say I don't immediately, because we haven't looked at the physical activity data yet. They improved their physical performance. We don't know that they increased their physical activity. So we haven't looked at that yet. So it may be because they were at risk of undernutrition to start with, so it may be that their nutrition changes have influenced that short physical performance battery. So I think that's to come. We believe we've got the people in the PROMET X group to increase physical activity. That was done with sessions with this physical trainer, which was provided online. Really careful thinking about the sorts of exercises that would be achievable with little equipment, and a mix of cardio and strength training. So, yeah, we haven't looked at it yet, but I think it'll be interesting to see. We were surprised by the physical performance data.
Actually, this is an amazing point, and I think we need to take into account also what we call the social behavioral sciences incorporated in there. If you're watching your diet, it is most likely that you will watch your exercise pattern. Now, saying that, you have to realize that this could vary from area to an area. If you are on a green space that people can go for a walk, they will do it. If you're in the city with limited amount, this may not be visible as well. However, you might be walking more, which counts towards. So it's a more complicated issue, but I think it has to be taken into account, and I completely agree with both of you. Next question. Yes.
Thank you. I think the question for Eugene, because if I understand correctly, the Mediterranean diet plus exercise group, they actually gain more weight than the control group, which is very, very interesting. So first of all, you didn't control for energy intake.
Did we control for energy intake in that outcome?
Did you ask the participant to maintain the calorie?
No, they were at risk of undernutrition, so we were trying to boost energy intake and boost protein intake, and they were, mid-range BMI, which is unusual for our population. So that was the drive, was to improve their nutrition and, using the Mediterranean diet with protein enrichment to try and drive that diet quality and reduce the risk of undernutrition. So it was a very different ambition of the study, I suppose.
Yeah, but could you explain, the weight change, the weight gain actually for the Mediterranean diet plus exercise group?
You mean in terms of did their calorie intake increase?
I'm wondering because, typically people would think if you increase your exercise, physical activity, you may facilitate weight control. But if I observe correctly, the exercise group actually gain more weight than control group. Do you have an explanation for that?
I think that's probably due to the dietary component of it. so that the dietary component was not outweighed enough by the physical activity component. But we haven't looked at the diet diaries yet, so we have all that sort of noted, and we'll have their physical activity monitored. But we haven't looked at it. Those results are literally just released. So,
did you? I mean, last question. Did you look into fat masking versus lean masking for that group?
we do. We have body composition assessments, so we'll be able to look at that as well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? I have a question for both of you. How do you think we can promote a kind of grouping of all of you guys that are doing the randomized trials, in order to develop a consortium on applying for funding to European Commission or even to NIHS?
I don't know how we do it, but that would be fantastic. I mean, our studies are small scale, but I think we've shown we can get dietary change and we can sustain it to 12 months. But the idea is then to sort of take that forward and try to measure impact on clinical outcomes following in the tradition of PREDIMED Plus. Yeah, absolutely.
Here, the costs are not the same as in the use. In the use, I think that the PREDIMED Plus will cost about $100 million, if no more. Here, we obtain funds from the Ministry of Health, and we have to here, but if it wasn't enough, we cannot afford all the funds we receive. Here in Jaén, we have to count on the Diputación of Jaén, the funder of this meeting, who provide us a person for doing the intervention and has been paid for 9 years. What I think is here, no? What? Our nutritionist, paid by Deputation of Jaén. The cost of the last 3 years funded by the Ministry of Health for our group was only 30,000 euros. It's very small quantity. The salary of our nutritionist is about 24,000 euros a year. So the Deputation of Jaén has paid much more than the Ministry of Health. Also, the University of Jaén provides us some funds to pay for a nurse who collect the samples. Is here, I think, also. Yeah, besides. Entonces, I think, well, I've been living in the US many years ago. Salaries, the cost of research is enormous, very, very high. Here, we have to do the things at a small quantity. We have to invent.
So this is exactly, I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's very, very difficult to get this money. So this is what I'm talking about, putting a consortium together that we can apply to European Commission. There are grants up to $10 million for 5 years that we can have this increased number of randomized clinical trials that, it will increase at least the science-based evidence about the value of the olive oil in the Mediterranean diet. And that's what I'm trying to do. So you're going to receive an email from me for creating this kind of groups together, and we can create a framework that we can move forward. And this is one of the purposes of this conference. The conference also we're having in Crete, trying to bring people together to collaborate. Okay? Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for the wonderful presentations. Thank the organizers one more time for putting such beautiful sessions together. Thank you very much, and I think, is it next session now, right?